Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and everything in between. Welcome back to Old Man Rambles. Now, I would like to stress that I did not win the lottery. Yet again, I have not won the lottery. Um, but it has been on my mind a lot lately. I mean, the jackpot got bigger and bigger, up to like $1.8 billion. The cash would have been around $800 million. And as I watch the numbers climb, it's too much money. I mean, I freely admit I can be greedy and selfish, but my greed has limits. I have no interest in gold or diamonds or starting a fancy sports car collection like Jay Leno. I have no desire for multiple homes. I don't want to live in Malibu among the celebrities. I don't want my own private jet or my own private island or anything. I just want to be comfortable. And that much money is too much money. Um, I once did the math to try and figure out how much money it would take for me to be able to do everything I wanted to do. And it turns out it's around three or $400,000. That's after tax. That's actual spending money. So actual income would have to be around $800,000 or more, or more, whatever. But money after taxes, three or $400,000 would do everything I wanted to do. And that jackpot, between federal and state taxes, depending on where you live, state taxes could be fairly high. You would still wind up, even if you paid the maximum amount of federal, maximum amount of state, you did tax yourself, you had no accountant, you'd still wind up with over $300 million. And, like I said, $300,000 or $400,000 would do it for me. If I had that much money, that's 10, just the return on any investment that I made would be 10 times that. If I stuck that like a CD account, I would be earning, around 4 million a year after taxes. I'm rounding these numbers off to make the math easy. I'm good with math, but not that good. So I'm rounding these numbers off to make my math easier. Um, I couldn't spend that much money. There's nothing I would want to spend it on. I'd spend my $300,000 or $400,000, and then I'd have a few $1,000,000 left over. When I was younger, in my 20s and 30s, if I took too much time off, I would start to get kind of antsy and be ready to go back to work. Not because I wanted to work and love my job, but just there wasn't enough to do around the house to keep me occupied. I mean, I play video games, I read books, I had young children to play with and spend time with, but unless I had something that kept me super busy the entire time I was away from work, like if I had taken 2 weeks off from work and had really nothing planned to do, I would be bored out of my mind. If I was younger, I would have opened up my own business. But now that I'm older, nearing 60, it's like, I've had a couple weeks off with very little to do. I'd accumulated a lot of vacations and I had to use or lose. So I mean, I've been off for over 2 weeks now, and I don't want to go back to work. I'm ready to be done. So I mean, I don't have the mental stamina to start my own business. I wouldn't know what to do with that much money. It's too much. There's a part of me that would want to be generous. I'd love to be generous, but I could be generous with, a lot less. Um, that's even too much to give away. There's limits on how much you can give people. I've looked into this before taxes cut in. You know, Even if I gave on my side, my wife's side, all of my family and friends the maximum amount you could give them before taxes cut in, we're still only talking maybe $1 million. I'd still have $2 million left over to give away, which I would probably not donate to charity. To be honest with you, I'd do something charitable with it. I really would. But it's like I said, it's too much money. There wouldn't, aside from not having to work and a couple things around around the house, we'd make some changes to the house. I'd splurge on a couple of things. I'd buy a really, really good computer. Um, there's maybe like 6 or 8 things that I would like have custom made if I had that kind of money, but it's too much money for me to spend. And I wouldn't know what to do with it. It's too much. Um, and then there's obviously the family. We all have those members of our family who, the instant they found out we had that money, would be there with their hand out. Um, I've had family members tell me that if I won $100 million, they would expect to get 10. They were dead serious. That's 100 million before taxes, mind you. After taxes, I wind up with like 40 or 50, but they would still expect their 10. They're like, what do you got them? You got the spare cash. You can give it to me. They were dead serious. Um, so, I mean, as much as I would like to be generous, we couldn't give away that much money to our family and friends because they're not that stupid. They would do the math and figure out, holy crap, they're giving away hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. Where are they getting it from? They must have won the lottery. So as much as I would like to be generous with my family and friends, I couldn't be as generous as I'd like to because people would find out. And of course, we all have that family member who can't keep their mouth shut. If any of my family members are watching this, and I know at least one of them does, you know who I'm talking about. The person who would tell everyone. They'd be going out to breakfast and tell the waitress, "Oh, you know that big lottery? Well, I'm related to so and so." You know they wouldn't keep their mouth shut. Um, and and not having people find out would also become crucial for other reasons. Um, they say don't plan to win the lottery, but have a plan if you do. So I was kind of like thinking logistically, what would I do with this money? Um, you can't just go down to the credit union and deposit $300 million. They can't handle that kind of money either. You'd have to find a specialized bank that deals with these large numbers. Um, you'd probably have to go to somewhere like New York or Massachusetts if you're on the East Coast. One of the New York, Massachusetts, Chicago, um, New England only has one or two states where you could probably do that. But yeah, you'd have to go out of state, or at least out of the state that I live in, you know, to find a bank who could handle that kind of cash. Um, but the other thing too, when I was looking into this, of course, obviously articles come up about other people who have won this money and what they have done with it. And I was like, okay, what should I do to handle the money? And aside from, you know, banking, financial advisors, and lawyers and accountants, the very first thing they recommend that you do, aside from not tell anyone, is disappear. Um, just vanish from the face of the earth. Because they mentioned at least three people who had won these very, very large, multiple hundreds of millions of dollars lotteries, who had their lives threatened. People who needed 24-hour security 7 days a week, 365 days a year. These people just had a security entourage because their lives were in danger because they won so much money. And aside from the fact that I don't necessarily want to disappear, I like where I live. I like my home, despite the fact that it's getting old and it needs repairs and I'd like a slightly larger one. I like where I live. I wouldn't want to move. I wouldn't want to have to vanish. Winning that sort of money started to become scary. I don't want to have a fleet of people, accountants, lawyers, financial advisors, and security personnel constantly being a part of my life. I want my life to be easy and comfortable. I would like to just have the money sit somewhere and have me collect the dividends or interest and live off that. That's all I really want and need is to be comfortable. I don't need these huge ostentatious displays of money. And I started looking at the reality of what I would have to do if I won such a huge amount of money. If I had, after setting aside money for taxes, I had $320 million available to me. It became terrifying. I still bought the tickets. But I started to worry what I would do if I won. It stopped becoming exciting and thrilling and becoming anxious and terrifying. I didn't want that much money. I would have been happy to win it. I would have accepted it. I wouldn't have turned it down. Yeah. But the last thing I would do if I won the lottery, especially that kind of money, was to go on the internet and make a YouTube video about it. Good hunting.